May I welcome now Dominic Herzog, Chief Data Scientist at TX Group AG, as he navigates the landscape of AI in media in his talk, Navigating the Horizons, AI in Media, Balancing Innovation, Quality, and Responsibility. Dominic, at least I can't wait to hear about the media.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for this kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today and give you some insights in where the TX Group is currently heading to, how we are balancing, as told, like innovation, quality, but as well as the responsibility. So who are we, the TX Group? So we are the largest private media company in Switzerland, having more than 3,000 employees working for us. We are covering on the one hand side, paid media with more than a dozen newspapers which are printed but also online. We have a commuter media with 20 minutes. On the other hand, we are also owning Goldbach, which is an advertising company, so we can use our first-party data knowledge about the users also to give them appropriate ads in the end. And last but not least, we're also having TX Markets and TX Ventures, which are covering different auction platforms and classified marketplaces. So if I'm talking about AI media, maybe quickly mention what I'm talking here about. I mean, you all are using AI, I guess, in your daily life as well. I mean, it's the term itself about having a machine in the end doing decisions which probably humans' intelligence was needed, such that they can do those interactions maybe without having the humans in place anymore. I think in most of the cases which I'm talking about today, it's more about IA. So how can we use the technology to have some intelligence augmentation? We want to have the systems assisting our journalists, our employees, in their daily life to give them more possibilities, increasing the reach and so on. So it's not really about that we want to replace their decisions in the end. So I think that's a quite important difference in the end. Since we are a media company, I mean, we have hundreds of thousands, millions of readers of our news, which is very important in the end for them to see what's going on worldwide, what's going on in Switzerland, to make their own opinion, and as well here, very important in the end for a democratic country in the end to have well-informed people. So we have quite a responsibility and staying there also for our ethics in the end to have to have this responsibility and to keeping up to that. And therefore, also with the new technologies, we always also want to see how we can use them in a way which are in line with our standards and also with what our readers are expecting when they're consuming our products. I mean, why are we eager of that? Of course, also the new technologies can harm in the end, especially if it's about being well-informed with all fake news, if you think about hallucinations and all those things, where, I mean, you know the backdraws of the current, for example, also generative AI systems in the end. And that's where we need to have a very close look at, in the end, how we are using those technologies. Starting with data in the end, and also, of course, maybe, or quite sure, our data, even though that there are high journalistic quality, might have some biases in there as well. They're still being produced by humans over time. But also, if we're talking about data, here the ownership is quite important for us. I mean, we do have an archive of dozens of years of news articles which have been written, which are very well researched, and which are in our archive, which we can use in the end either to train models or to use elsewhere. First, I'm going here also, well, what are we doing with our data? Okay, of course, we're doing meta tags on top of them, categorization them to know the user's interests, either for product development as well for the ads which should be displayed, but also having knowing better about like what have we produced, maybe not only yesterday, because there we have all the people employed in the company who know what we wrote, but also what have we delivered maybe 10 years ago and how has it evolved over time. So I'm first looking into this section and going a little bit, well, of course, we have like guidelines and visions and principles as well on the group, and how can we use our data which are automatically annotated through our models in the end to make sure that the guidelines and visions which we do have are matching actually also with the products we are delivering there. And here again, of course, you can read through the newspaper and you can read all the articles, but to have a long-term view, we need to have algorithms in the end in the background. And one of those two examples I'm giving here, which you're caring much about, is the visibility of women, and also here to see what was the long-term trend in the end in our products. It's always easy just to talk about this metric, and of course, everyone would agree in the company, yes, it's important. However, as long as you're not measuring it, you don't know at which level you currently are, and you might not know, are we improving or are we not? We also need to have those measurements in the end to have an industry comparison to see where are we compared to our competitors, to the markets. And if we're looking at the numbers here, I mean, over 10 years, like the visibility has increased of women in our newspapers. If we're looking at text, it was like from 16% to 25%. Well, I leave it up to you to say, well, is 25% enough or should it be even more? But only through measuring it, we actually can, in the end, also define the KPIs where we want to go. More than that, those annotations of the data helps us also to drill down further. If you think, well, 25% might not be enough, where do we currently see on which dimensions that this visibility is provided, and where is it maybe also a little bit lacking? So we can use the data as well to drill it down and to split it, to say, well, do we see differences? Do we see differences among authors? And here, for example, do we see difference about the gender of the authors who are providing this visibility? And there we see clearly that, like, if females are writing articles in 2022, the visibility is 35%, while if there's male authors, it's only 22%. So we do see this gap. We do see that it's persistent over the past decade. It's persistent in all subsections across all our newspapers. And therefore, again, only if we can measure it, we can use these data in the end to improve our product and to set new goals. The second example here is about news avoidance. I mean, there have been quite some studies recently released that especially young people are avoiding to read news, and their main, or like the second reason they are giving back is, well, it's just too many bad news, and therefore they feel bad after reading the newspaper, so they just stop reading it. Now, of course, we're a reflection of the world, so we cannot just change and only talk about good things. If there are wars going on, well, yes, it might tear your mood down. However, again, well, we don't really know how many articles we have out there, or we didn't know in the past, and therefore it was important for us as well to have an AI model in the end, which is narrow in the sense of, well, it has this task of classifying our articles into the moods, to give into those categories of, is it a very negative, is it a very positive article in the end, which we can give back to the newsrooms, which then have the transparency about, well, how many good or happy news are there in the top 10 articles on the website. I might want to change a little bit the ordering there without having such a measurement and without having a model trained which can do exactly this task. And which we also want to understand where the labels are coming from. Yes, we need to build those systems, and we want to do that. Why do we need to want to know where it's coming from? I think that's quite clear. I mean, if we're giving back such metrics to the newsrooms, the first questions which is coming around is, well, how do you know? Or maybe like, would there be an easy thing to be improved in the title, in the text, and also to make it more positive, even though that the message itself, of course, cannot be changed. If we're going away from these examples of how we are using AI models for our guidelines, vision, and principles, let's go to our main area as well. Like, how can we improve our product, which in the end is news generation, and maybe potentially also create new USPs there? So key point here, which is of course entangled with responsibility, is the faithfulness. So whenever we want to use new technology here, we need to make sure that the news we are producing and which we are putting out there can be trusted. So we're currently tackling this from two dimensions as well. So the first one is, well, we need to have guidelines, and that's what we put in place like half a year ago as well, on make it transparent what we are doing, which technology we are using, and for which use cases we do that. I think there is nothing wrong with using the technologies. However, we need to make sure that the users which have read our newspapers over decades and know, well, there was a journalist actually researching, proofreading the article before it has been published, that they know in which cases that might not be the case or in which extent it's not been. So there, the guidelines are quite clear. Well, we only are publishing news articles which have been proofreading by journalists. They can, within the process of generating the article or of generating, for example, lead summarization and so on, use tools. However, in the end, they are responsible for the output, and it's not possible for them to outsource this responsibility. Or another example is with the images, where it's clearly stated that we are not printing any artificially generated images within our newspapers, with two exceptions. The first one is, well, it's just so crystal clear that this is not reflecting the reality, what is on this image, that is just really made up. And the second one is, well, if the article itself is about image generation, and therefore we want to show examples as well. I think this is the direction here where it's important, even before using the technologies, to be sure about, well, what do you actually want to do, and how do you make sure that the people consuming your products know what you have done in the end. The second stream is teaming up with research, where our research partner is the Media Technology Center from DETH Zurich, where it's about, well, in which areas do we don't want to wait until other researchers, until another company provides a solution to do something more about biases, about hallucinations. Where do we have special cases like, well, yes, in Switzerland the main language is German. However, our Swiss-German dialect also, which is somehow presented in the German, which is in the newspapers, is not the proper high German in the end. So we need to reflect that when thinking about using standardized models as well, and therefore we teamed up there with first-class researchers as well. Having this said, let's go back to approving the products in the end. So the first thing here to be mentioned, or like what we're doing, I mean, a lot of our readers are interested in what's going on in their own community, in their hometown, being from what's their super small soccer club has played on the weekend in the lower league, but also what's happening elsewhere in politics there. So for this one, most often, I mean, yes, this is not AI. We have Excel spreadsheets with the numbers in the background, rules which are then putting in a template the result or representation of the data into proper language, which then can be read. However, where we are experimenting there as well with the new techniques is, well, generating those templates is quite intensive. It requires a lot of time from journalists to put together all those rules, to go through edge cases and so on. So we can use generative AI or those techniques to generate the first draft of those rules, which then of course needs to be proofread, resulting in rules which we then can publish articles based on. So even though that we have used other techniques to generate the rule than just having the journalist putting together all the rules, the end product is something where we know exactly why each word in this article has been like that, because we know the data behind and we do know the rules. The second area is about summarization, lead generation, transformation of the text. So if the journalist has written already an article, there are a lot of additional steps which are needed afterwards before it's published. And there as well, using nowadays method helps us or helps the journalist to be more efficient in after creating his article to get all of those pieces, to have a suggestion for the lead, a suggestion for the title, which speeds up his work there. So still the journalist itself remains in the loop. He needs to decide and approve all of those fields in the end. However, it helps in these steps, which might also not be the ones where their skills are the best used in the end. And what also gets more and more important are the different news channels. So also here, less users are coming especially to our news apps, to our news websites and so on. They are more on other apps and on social media and so on. So if we do have a news article which is ready, which is published on our internal channels, we might want to spread them on different other channels as well, giving them a link, giving them in the end a lead to having access to the original article. And here as well, we are currently experimenting or using these techniques. Last but not least, we also have one use case where we are not proofreading in the end the article, and this is an example from 20 Minutes, so the commuter newspaper here, which is originally published in German as well as in French, and what they are doing is then translating it in dozens of other languages which are available in the app. Here it's important to say, well, if you're switching your language on the app to any of those languages, it's largely highlighted that whatever you will read is a translation. If you want to have the ground truth, you need to read in the end the original article. Here, this is one of those cases where the journalist is not in the loop anymore. They are not proofreading all of those translations in the end. However, here it's about extending the reach or also picking up possibilities or putting services like when there's a new war started somewhere in the world, to think about, well, translating it into the language that people speak there, such that they have access to the news which have been produced in Switzerland, and that they can read those news in addition to what they get in their home country. So I've talked now about, well, the article has been written. However, if you're going back a little bit to the data, the additional thing which we have is, of course, our archive with all the news articles which have published in the past. Of course, there are some which are outdated from the news content. However, there are also a lot of evergreen articles which are still true today. And here as well, having for example, a RAC environment which allows to research based on this archive in a different way than done in the past, or also to leverage these assets again and make them available to public, while in the archive no one finds them anymore, is also a different angle we are currently looking at to reuse what already has been produced in the past that is still valid. All of this, in the end, it goes in this direction of, well, everything is using large language models in the end in the background. So, of course, we want to have chat interactions for the journalists with their own data, with our archive. However, what do we really want from those large language models? Well, we want to have their language skills to understand the needs of the users, of the journalists, and we want them to formulate an answer which is proper German or French in the end. However, what we're not really interested in is the average belief around the world itself, which they have learned as well there. So, and this is the connection to our data. So, well, in our databases, we have articles which have been well researched by our journalists in the past. So we want to rely on this knowledge about the facts which are in there. And on the other hand, also, if we're thinking about business processes as well, there might be quite some data which you have in-house internally, which in the end are confidential. We don't want to just send them around to any systems. And therefore, again, there are some use cases where, yeah, we just come to the question in the end, which has not yet been solved. Well, at which point it makes sense, not only from a confidential point of view, but also from a financial point of view, depending on which services we want to offer, not only to our journalists, but also to users in the end, when is the right time here also to host in the end an own model, and, well, which one it will be. So overall, for me, if we are looking into those technologies and how we want to use them in the future, it's about this. It's not only about our view. It's also about taking the views and the needs, of course, of the journalists into account, of all the other employees in our company, having internal AI competency. We are right at this level where yes, we are large enough to have an own team. However, of course, we are not a big tech company in the end, but still having those skills in-house, having those research partnerships allows us in the end to combine those strengths of those different skills, not thinking about, well, that we are somewhere against each other, and we are working together with the journalists and the newsroom. We need to understand their needs in the end. It's not about, or because it's about creating tools which they can use. And last but not least as well, having those tools at hand which really serves our needs, which we really have, and maybe not only the needs which we think we have, because we have seen that there's something new on the market. And if you're combining those strengths in the end, it allows us to do this cherry picking. In which kind of cases does it make sense to use one or the other approach? What do we actually want? Research, in which direction they should go, that it serves us as well, to think about the technology which do we want to use in the end, because it really serves our purposes. And so to wrap it up in which direction we are currently going, I think it's very important in the end to be at the state of the art, to know what's currently out there, to know exactly what are the weaknesses of the current approaches, to know what the risks are in the end, because we have built up quite a reputation in the past 130 years about what people can expect reading our news. It's are those thoughts about, well, in which components does it actually make sense to build something, because we also want to be in control, and we want to really understand where the output is coming from, and we don't want to have a black box there. And I think all of those things are the most important, where we do see that we are working on our core businesses, where we might work on our USP, why users are consuming our newspapers, and there we need to be strong, especially if we want to incorporate new technologies. And so to wrap up the circle here, it's not always about also what's feasible, because a lot of things are feasible, but it's also about what's desirable in the end. We don't want to build just stuff just because we can do it, but because it really makes sense and it gives additional values and serves additional needs from our customers, which without the technologies in the past have not been able to serve. And well, yes, sometimes it also means, maybe especially in the cases where we are not in our core domain, to buy technology as well. And I think this decision also sometimes or often depends on this term speed, where, well, newsrooms see, well, we need to buy something because we are faster than. I'm convinced here, well, if you're waiting until the market shows you what's possible and then your need is created, well, yes, then maybe buying something is fast. However, if you really think about what are your current use cases and what are your needs you want to be solved, even though that there is currently not a solution on the market, having internal knowledge and skills, monitoring where we are at the state of the art, discovering when we have a moment where it makes sense to hook in, to build something to really serve those needs, then it's, even though if you are at the same speed as if you would start later on, you start at the moment where it's actually possible to work on those use cases, and therefore to see the strengths as well of those in-house knowledges and skills in this area here. So I hope I gave you a little bit an overview of where we as a large media company are currently on seeing the technologies and seeing how we can use them. And I thank you a lot for your attention. I wish all of you a good rest of the conference.
Any questions? Here's the question there. While the microphone is on its way, I'll ask you, are you specially labeling the content that is created by AI?
The one which has not been proofread by journalists need to be labeled as...
So if it is proofread by journalists, you consider it as a journalist book?
Yes, if AI has been used as a tool to help the journalists, but in the end, yes, then we are not labeling it explicitly. That's also how.
And images? What about images?
Well, with images it's very special because we just don't publish images which have been created, except for those two use cases where it's one super obvious, or...
But would you label them as AI image?
Still in those two cases, it needs to be labeled, yes.
Okay.
Thanks for the speech. Would you say that the use of AI actually upped your quality in the reports or in the news, or is it still the same?
It definitely helps to gain more reach. I mean, we can cover with the same strength of journalists and with the same amount of journalists, we can cover more topics. And letting the journalists focus on their main skills, on making sure that they have relevant news. And therefore, since the stuff needs to be proofreading, and I mean, journalists have very high standards also in their own work, they wouldn't approve articles which are not meeting their standards. So therefore, the quality itself is not going down just by having those tools in place.
Anybody else? Here?
Hi. So how do you actually make sure that ethical implication of the articles that are being built are kind of, taking consideration, like through the AI, that you make sure that you don't have any offensive materials or something like that?
Think again here. I mean, one of the things is definitely, I mean, we are aiming to that we are not just using any AI systems which are out there where we also don't control or don't have an influence in how they're creating the content. However, still, as we have the journalists being the ones, I mean, those tools are in place, the journalist is writing the article, then maybe a summary is generated, a lead is generated, so they know exactly what they have written down 10 minutes ago. So they are making sure that also the tone which is there from the summary and in the lead is according to the newspaper standards. And since we do not allow that this responsibility goes away from the journalist to, well, now someone else is responsible of that, and well, I've just used some tools. If it's hard on hard, it's the journalist. And still there, as long as they're meeting up to their own values, and I'm sure they will, and they will in the future as well, I don't see this one jeopardized.
Okay, anybody else? If not, yeah, Dominic, thank you very much.